This tutorial will show you how to use a keyword typed into a Teams message to trigger a Power Automate flow that resumes Azure Synapse SQL dedicated pools for a duration of time before pausing them again. First, you can use this keyword trigger with many other things in Power Automate other than Synapse. So why would you want to turn Synapse on and off? And why would you want to give the end users a way to turn it on and off? The Synapse SQL dedicated pools can get expensive when they're turned on, more expensive than many traditional databases, but you can pause them. Also, I was working with a team that only needed to run queries against Synapse a few times a week. When we were figuring out how to put this together, we were worried that people might turn on Synapse, use it, and then forget to turn it back off. And then after I built it, I figured many other teams out there might benefit from a powerful MPP database that they can query like a SQL endpoint, but with the added benefit of not having to pay for the compute when they're not using it. My name's Greg Beaumont. I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect with Microsoft. And if you'd like to install a Synapse database in order to recreate this yourself, we have one that you can install programmatically from GitHub, just using a very simple Azure ARM template. The link is provided on this page, and I'll also include it in the description below. Power Automate will also pause the database after a specified duration of time, so the users don't need to remember to turn Synapse off. I'll be the first to admit, when I've done proof of concepts in the past, there's been times that I've scaled a database up in Azure to a very powerful tier, then shut everything down for the weekend, and show up on Monday with a much bigger bill than I expected. This technique can be used to prevent those types of scenarios. Okay, so let's get started. Here we are in Power Automate on the home page. If I go ahead and click on Create, you can select an instant cloud flow. We'll hit skip and then select Microsoft Teams. And for this trigger, we want it to be when a specific keyword is mentioned in Teams. The message type for this example will be the channel. Now here you enter the keyword. One piece of advice is I've noticed that certain characters aren't always supported. You want to just keep this simple with lowercase words, but at the same time you want it to be something that people can remember without accidentally typing it in during a regular conversation. One other thing to consider is that you might want multiple flows for different groups of people or different scenarios. So there might be some users where you want them to be able to kickstart Synapse for 30 minutes and then have it spin back down, and others where it might be 2 hours or 4 hours. Maybe a manager can turn it on for 8 hours. And you can control the access to the flows in order to determine who gets to do what. For this example, we'll just say Synapse 30. The team will be CMS Medicare Part D, 3 Cloud Demo, and we'll just use the general channel. Next step is to fire up an Azure Data Factory package, which will be used to resume and pause Synapse. Now, before I scare you off and you quit watching the video, I'll have another video linked in the description below that shows you how to create the Azure Data Factory package, which calls an API to pause and resume Synapse. It's actually very simple and very easy to do, and as long as you have access to an Azure subscription, you should be able to get this deployed. Search for Azure Data. Under Azure Data Factory, we're going to create a pipeline run. Select my subscription, resource group, the name of the data factory where the pipeline exists, and then the name of the data factory pipeline. So we're going to start out by resuming Synapse. Then once we resume Synapse, we want to have a delay. So here's where we schedule a delay. In this example, it's going to be a 30-minute delay. You also have options for hours, days, even seconds. Not that that would really apply to this use case, weeks or months. And let's add one more step. This will be calling the pipeline to then pause Synapse. Same subscription, same resource group, same data factory name, but the pipeline we'll use here is pause. We can go ahead and name this Synapse 30 minutes, hit save. Okay, now let's give it a shot. If we move over here to Teams, I'll go ahead and hit New Conversation, and I'll just go ahead and type in Synapse 30, make sure I spell it right. Hit Enter, and that should kick off the flow. So if we move back here to Power Automate and refresh the run history, you'll see that a flow was kicked off. You'll see that the SQL pool is resuming, and users need to be made aware that it can take a few minutes to fire everything back up and get that compute ready to receive queries. And the end users don't ever have to come look at this view, but just for informational purposes, you can see that the database is now running. If we move back to Teams, you can now go to a report that uses that database. Or if you're using other tools that can hit a Synapse endpoint, which accepts SQL queries, you can use those tools too. For this example, we're using Power BI to connect to that database and then send queries against it. Your users can now interact with extremely large volumes of data and run some pretty complicated queries against that source. Okay, so now let's go 30 minutes into the future and refresh the flow. You'll see that the flow succeeded in 30 minutes and 25 seconds. And if I go back to Synapse, you'll see that the dedicated SQL pool is currently paused. So, just to summarize, users are able to type a keyword into Synapse to let people know that they're firing up the database. It will trigger a Power Automate flow that turns on Synapse for a defined duration of time. And then after that time, it will programmatically pause Synapse again so it doesn't accidentally get left on. This way you get the power of Microsoft Synapse with SQL dedicated pools, which is an MPP, big time, big power database with the ability to have end users turn it on and turn it off for short durations of time. So you only pay for the compute when you need to have it turned on. Again, related links and instructions on how to create the Data Factory pipeline are included in the comments below.